Wouldn't he let they just eat?
Well, she's doing her
Too,
job.
right?
And we just jumped right up and got out of there.
Yeah, I mean, she's catching on.
Love that.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the June 7th, 2018 State Board of Education meeting. I'm Bill Kobe, Chairman of the Board, and I call this meeting to order. Welcome to all board members and advisors, staff, on-site visitors, online listeners, and Twitter followers. I remind the audience and those listening that this body meets monthly with its official meeting scheduled for the first Thursday of the month. Committee meetings were held on yesterday prior to this official meeting day. As was the case yesterday, we met and discussed committee agenda items. I remind our on-site visitors and our online listeners that you can follow the meeting online and see all of our materials by going to State Board of Education meetings at www.ncpublicschools.org. Our agenda for June was approved yesterday, so we will proceed under the approved agenda. I will now read the ethics statement that is required of us. Board members, you are reminded that it is our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this board. Does any member of the board know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict of interest with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? And yes, would you like to repeat that?
Yes, CSOP 2, EICS 12, although it doesn't include Guilford County. Same subject matter, and EICS 14.
Okay, when we vote, maybe you could note that you abstain. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would also recuse myself on BSOP 2, but dealing with grants.
Okay,
I'll do that.
and note at the time also that you abstain. Okay, and you have one too?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you were just, yeah, confirmed, okay. Well, thank you for stating it for the record. If during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in the discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. At this time, I call on Mr. Alan Duncan to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. We now come to our special recognitions, a time on our agenda when we recognize those educators, schools, local school systems, or advisors for outstanding achievement and honors. Yesterday, we recognized our departing principal of the year, Mr. Jason Griffin, who had other commitments today, but we want to note again our appreciation for his service. We extend the same thanks to our outgoing Teacher of the Year advisor, Mr. Bobby Kavnar, who has served as a board advisor for 2 years now. I call on Mr. Kavnar to share a few words before coming forward for a certificate and a photo. So, Mr. Kavnar.
Thank you, Chairman Kobe, and I want to say thank you to this board. This has been one of the great honors of my life, and I hope that this is just the start for me. I have a long career ahead of me, and I'm not going anywhere in this state. Things are becoming more and more contentious, I think, in education, and it's good to know that the people on this board are willing to work with each other and listen to each other and are respectful of each other. Throughout my 2 years here, whether it was at dinner or here on the board, every one of you has been nothing but honest and forthright and willing to listen and patient and understanding. And also, when you're told something from experts in the field or teachers or students, that you take it very seriously and you listen to those voices, and that has been a thrill to know that you are all here at this board. And so I've been very grateful to have this experience. If I can give you one piece of advice as I leave, it's fill these 2 seats with 2 students. We lost our student advisors a year ago, and that's a voice we desperately need here on this board. And so however we can get that done, if you need some recommendations, I know a lot of great students, but we really need those 2 voices back. And so, but I'm not going anywhere. You're going to see me and hear from me, and I'm very grateful for this experience. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. And 1, 2, and 3. One more. 1, 2, and 3.
Oh, yeah. Don't worry. I never learned how to stay quiet. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
What does that say?
Thank you, Mr. Kavanaugh. The board knows you will continue to make tremendous difference in the lives of your students and in the district and school you serve. So many thanks. Last month, the Ernst & Young performance audit discussed transformation of NCDPI, and it included 18 recommendations. In response to those recommendations, the board formed a special committee to focus on the NCDPI transformation and requested that Dr. Petrie Martin lead that effort and report back to the board with a plan. We now move to our special committee on NCDPI transformation, and I recognize Mr. Eric Davis, the chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Co-chair of this committee with my colleague Greg Alcorn and committee members Todd Chastain, Becky Taylor, and Amy Wayne.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. But first I'd like to turn to our superintendent for any comments he has on this item, since we're working closely with the superintendent on this.
No, but this is clearly, I thought we were going to postpone this until later in the summer.
Right.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Okay.
I didn't know if you wanted to make any comments to that effect. Or
This is definitely work that needs to go on. I'm glad we have the EY report, and I'm glad that we're all working together on this.
Okay, great. Yes, as the superintendent said, we've elected, instead of kicking off this month, as we had contemplated last month, to postpone this until August in light of the budget issues we have to deal with in the current month. But we're looking forward to this as a exciting effort that will help us better serve the students in North Carolina.
Okay. Well, thank you. And now, Superintendent Johnson, I recognize you for the superintendent's report to the board.
Thank y'all. Another great month. And just a few of the highlights. We talked about the very exciting literacy program that we launched. We actually launched it at Cook Elementary School, which is actually now known as the Cook Literacy Model School. It is a restart. It is focused on literacy, and they are making strides there under the restart model. That's in Forsyth County. And we had a great visit there, and we're able to officially launch the news about the Wolfpack Works and the Hill Center literacy training that we are actually using Read to Achieve funds to get more coaching for teachers on how to teach reading. We then went to Durham Bulls have an education day, and one thing we wanted to do is highlight summer nutrition. We really are working hard to get the message out there that there are summer feeding nutrition locations open all throughout the summer where students and families can actually go and get meals at very low cost or no cost. And this is very important because we talked yesterday about the struggles that many families in our state face. We need to get the message out that this is a resource that's available for them and they should take advantage of. We'll also be working with the nutrition folks to make sure that we get books out to students. So when they come and get some food, we can also give them books and resources on the importance of keeping up with literacy throughout the summer. And they have a great mascot that y'all have already met, Ray, and we're actually we have some more fun visits planned for Ray next week, but we'll talk about that next month. Had a great Principal of the Year celebration. Congratulations to Principal Wallace at West Craven High School. I had the chance to go visit him after the official celebration. He's been doing some pretty amazing things, and I'm really impressed. We're gonna miss Jason. Wish he could stay on longer as well and have that elementary school perspective. But it's also going to be really exciting having the high school perspective come on to this board because he is working on a lot of things that are near and dear to my heart, such as a freshman academy and using the freshman academy to then connect students to successful pathways in their community. You're going to be hearing a lot of exciting things coming out of West Craven High School. And then again, some pictures from the event, and there was you can tell it's hard not to get emotional. He's up there in the corner when the announcement was made. We give a lot of due credit to Lieutenant Governor Forrest for his work on connecting schools to broadband. We actually celebrated this month the last classroom connected. So that means that every classroom in North Carolina is actually connected to high-speed internet. Now it's up to us to determine how we use that amazing milestone to help students through personalized learning and through pathways. We are the first state to accomplish this, and that is a great milestone that we should celebrate. And we actually did it by leveraging state funds against federal funds and on an expedited timeline. So thank you all for your support for that. Thank the General Assembly, and thank Lieutenant Governor Forrest for his leadership on that, and the Friday Institute too. Definitely integral in making that happen. And we just paid before school was out, we made a last stop to Winstead Avenue Elementary over in Rocky Mount. They are actually starting their dual immersion program. It just started this year. We wanted to go check in on how that's going. And students in kindergarten are absolutely thrilled by it. Dual immersion is something where when you're a kindergartner and you walk into a classroom and you don't know any bit of Spanish, it can be very intimidating. But when you go in and check on them in the school year, they're just fully engaged and involved. And again, I've just been such a proponent of this dual immersion program because it's not just about the skill of learning Spanish or another language. It's actually using different parts of the brain. And when you use different parts of the brain to learn different languages and the way different languages work differently, it actually correlates to doing better in other subjects as well. I also took the time to proctor an EOG this same week as well. I proctored a 4th grade ELA EOG, and that was a few hours of my day. That was very well spent. Being able to see what the students go through, what the teacher goes through, and also getting the feedback from the teacher on her experiences with testing in our state. We talked yesterday about North Carolina Virtual Public School and the steps they are taking to ensure quality, and I think this was very appropriate that they actually were featured in Quality Matters newsletter for May 2018. So they were celebrated for putting quality and assurance into practice, and that's very good news. So thank you all for your hard work there. And then just a personal note, I asked Susan to throw this in there because we also wanted to congratulate Ann Goodnight. She was the 2018 J. Robinson Education Leadership Award winner. This one in particular because I was able to meet Mrs. Goodnight upon taking office here, and she is actually, this ties in because she's a supporter of the Hill Center. She actually does a lot to support the Hill Center, and the Hill Center is the group that is working with us to do the master literacy training. So that's just one example of things that she's done for education. So we were excited to hear that she was given that award. Wanted you all to see just some pictures of the amazing art performances we've had in the last month. This has been really enjoyable. It's been really great to, instead of just at the holidays, get the students into the school building and highlight the arts and the importance of arts throughout the entire school year. So here we have Daniels Middle School. This was I believe if I'm correct, this was the first year they had their dance program. But you would not have been able to tell that based on the talent that was showcased right here in the lobby of DPI. And then I'll put all these pictures up because you can definitely tell this is the show choir, and they came here. They were just here on Monday, and it was very nice to have some pep and some show choir on a Monday, and not just a Monday, but a Monday of a state board meeting week. So that was very appreciated, and they were absolutely fantastic. Just the talent from around the state is just absolutely astounding, and it's just great to be able to have them to showcase them in our building. I've also been asked by 2 board members to give updates on 2 separate commissions. One is, I don't have a slide for it, is the Textbook Commission. The Textbook Commission is very important work. The Textbook Commission requires qualified candidates who definitely are able to do that important work. What makes it difficult on the Textbook Commission is some of those meetings for the Textbook Commission actually take up to a week. It's a lot of work. So finding the right balance of who's qualified and has the right perspective to do that work, but can also then devote a week of time to doing that work can be difficult. We had a full board appointed. Some members decided to resign because the meetings were too long and they could not commit the time. We actually just sent over some names to the governor's office for his approval to get more members on the board. But if any board members have anyone in mind that can help with that work, we'd appreciate that. And with that said, I also want to give a enormous thanks to actually Superintendent Lynn Moody from Rowan Salisbury, who's leading that effort. And the work is important because she is actually looking at it with the lens of how do we move out of this idea of the 20th century work of a textbook commission into what it needs to be for the 21st century. So very, very grateful for Superintendent Moody stepping up to lead that commission.
Superintendent, how many more members do you need?
We can, if Stacy Wilson Norman is in the room, you can, I don't know exactly where the count is right now. I know we just sent one over to the governor, so I imagine it's probably just a handful.
I think it's less than 5, about 4 more members.
And they also have to fit certain criteria,
Certain
too.
criteria, so we can look to see if we need teachers, if we need parents for that criteria. So that's something we can get and share.
Trish Whittleby served on it, and it's always been kind of difficult that week long, particularly if you're a long ways off, and finding the people in the categories. But it's important work.
I'm happy if you will send out what you're looking for. I had no idea those positions had not been filled. That's really important, and I will just say in my service there were people who were very happy to serve because it is an important way to get the right materials. And back even in the late 80s, early 90s, we were looking at electronic. That meant something different then than it does now. But if you'll send out to us
We'll make
what
sure
you're
we get to
looking
that.
for, I think we can help.
One final question. So are we going to have any recommendations regarding this in July? I know we're a year behind now, and we're rolling out new standards without textbooks at the same time. So what is our plan of action here?
What we have done is the textbook commission is meeting. We are delaying our schedule a little bit so that we can remain on schedule to give us time to get some more commissioners. So we will be maybe about 3 weeks behind, but still moving forward.
Okay, so we should have something.
We should have a
for this.
recommendation for the board, yes.
Just another quick question. Are the members to represent regions or is it at large?
I think it's at large, but it's specific criteria of
Experience criteria.
yeah. It's
So not so
you
much-
have to have one person has to come officially as a parent perspective. One person has to come officially as a teacher perspective, and obviously finding a teacher that we can ask to give up a whole week for a meeting.
Summertime.
Those were in the summer, yeah. They were usually in the summer. Right. Thank you.
This shows 1, 2, 3.
Teacher of the year.
So the second commission I was asked to give an update on, we put some information on the slide so you can read this as you go. So I'm not going to read the entire slide out. This is the superintendent's working group on student health and well-being. So this slide is on the background of the working group, and I'll give a minute just for you so you can read that. And this is officially what it was tasked with doing in the last legislative session. And so that work has gone on. The next slide, I wanted you to see that we really got a broad representation of people to serve on this group. And then the next slide looks like, I apologize, it stretches over, but the reason I put this all on the slide is it should be on your materials on the e-board. This goes through the process that we just completed. So you will have the recommendations in front of you as well. I think this is a good summary of the broad view of being able to not tell school districts specifically what they have to do, but being also a force of saying we all need to do something. So the recommendations will be very much focused on making sure that there is time set aside to talk about mental health issues, and then us working together as DPI and the state board to identify the resources that would be recommended for principals to then choose what do we need to talk about this school year with our staff. So that can it can be based on national issues. Obviously, we've had some terrible tragedies over the past few months that maybe when they come back to school, for example, next school year, they want to talk about mental health and the focus of school safety. But this also gives the flexibility to a principal if they had a tragedy of, heaven forbid, a student taking their own life, they would be able to then, focus that time for that one session on that resource. It also is so that every new teacher would get that full slate of professional development so that they know how to target some of those key issues.
And Superintendent,
Yes, and then the next, you have this in front of you,
right.
But the next one are the actual list of recommendations.
So just a couple of things.
Yes.
One, last year, you'll recall, we had a mental health policy that came to this board, and, there's a lot of angst about resources and how we can implement this. And, I think everyone on this board agrees this is incredibly important work.
Yes.
But, I look at recommendation number 8 and, increasing the number of school personnel to support this. And, we've been woefully behind in having these kinds of supports for our students. And, I just would like to know what you think is coming in the next year or 2, 3.
Well, I'm excited. The current budget puts in money for grants to actually look at getting more of these important personnel. I will say the grant money in there is not going to cover the need that we have, obviously.
No, not close.
But what's great is that we're going to be able to start addressing those needs and then showing what works, showing the return on investment that those resources can provide. And I believe working with the General Assembly coming next year in the long session and then finding even more resources to vote to things that we show works.
Did they, I have a call, I haven't had a chance to check it, I don't think it's located here. Did the legislature reduce or eliminate the funding for the suicide call, prevention call line? I think they eliminated that.
I don't know where that ended up. I know I only saw
I had
that.
several calls.
Right, I only saw that from what I've read in the paper
and it
about
said,
that specific part of the budget.
It did say they eliminated, didn't it?
That's probably something we can ask the legislative staff.
It's related to these recommendations for sure.
Yeah, well, they are, and I know we're talking a little bit about school safety here as part of this larger mental health and well-being thing, but I do want to point out that last Sunday I read the Asheville Citizen, and it had the usual things, the proms and the weddings, and it talked about teacher salaries. But the front page headline of the front page of that is, we got lucky We got lucky. And that's from the superintendent of schools in Macon County. We got lucky, and I think sometimes it's gonna take luck, but boy, I just hope we don't, as you said, God forbid it, prevention, but God forbid it be something else that's, we've just got to do everything. Tricia addressed it a couple, 3 months ago. I said some things last month. I don't have all the answers. I don't think any of us do. But I'm bothered by that.
Yes, and I can tell you the work of this group is not done. This group will continue to work. I have already tasked it before the teacher working condition surveys came out with looking at classroom management and ways we can help teachers. And then it was actually very telling to see in the teacher working condition survey that teachers feel like classroom management has gone down. So I'm glad we already had an eye on that. Also, you can note that it's the student mental health and well-being working group. We're also going to use that group because of its broad reach to start addressing what the mental health resources are that we can recommend to put into our schools. And then we will have the grant program from the General Assembly as well to look at both venues of how do we do more mental health resources, which we know we have to. How do we connect those warning signs to the proper principal or guidance counselor or school psychologist? How do we connect that to avoid an issue becoming a tragedy? And then also taking steps to harden schools as well, which is part of the reality. We have to look at that as well.
Is there a separate bill that requires those assessments? Isn't that part of the budget bill that requires kind of an annual assessment of each of the schools? And how's that going to manifest? Do you know yet?
I'm sorry, I don't know the details on that. I do know there's another bill that's part of the budget. It's in the budget that we're also excited about, which is the funding for a school safety app. And it's just another way that if anyone's having any issues, they can use that app to do an anonymous tip to the safety center that will be developed under this program and connect those issues so they don't become tragedies.
Well, the way I read it, and I hope it is the case, that every school will have this assessment. I would encourage breaking out of the normal group, bring in some architects, engineers, IT people who might not be the normal folks who we would think of when we're thinking about school safety, but think about some people that could look at designing things different, engineering things a little different, and kind of break out of the mold. So I don't think I don't think it's managed from here, but I think, we all ought to play a part in that.
That concludes my report. Thank you.
Well,
Mr. Chair, could I say?
Did you have an answer to my
sorry.
question from yesterday about contract 8?
Yes, that is part of the funds that are in the restricted
In
portion.
your office funds? Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I meant to ask you about the $200 per teacher thing. Is that done? Is it going so that no money will revert, is what I really want to ask.
Yes, there will not be reversions from Read to Achieve money this year.
And I just want to point out, because I was asked to do this, that several of the LEAs are having to put some local money in to meet the requirement. As I understand it, it's $200 per 20 teachers, or 20 students, sorry, per 20 students. And in some cases, that's turned out to be a requirement. And then the confusion around, you and I have talked about this, around the $200 per teacher. Sometimes that turns out to be 10 teachers and a pot of money for that group. And if it turns out to be that the LEA has to put in $1,000 to make it up, then they're doing that.
Oh, I'm absolutely happy to talk to a superintendent who's run into that issue. But it is great that if that is an issue that they wanted to go beyond the K-3 reading teacher,
I think it has to do with average
class size.
Class size, yes. They're getting $200 per 20 students instead of $200 per teacher, and it turns out to be in some cases more money required in order to do that. So they're doing it.
No, that's great to hear they're doing it. I have not heard that, but if there's a superintendent that has that concern, absolutely they should reach out.
And before we leave, Mr. Chair, I'd like to just say one word of commendation to this department here, and I think this might be the place. You might be going to say something about it, but this week we got ESSA approval of our plan.
Right.
And I just, for those of us who kind of went through that, it was lots of work. I would say it was a great process. To be candid, the collaboration that we had there with advocacy groups and our partners out there and the business community and the process was, I must say, I believe we had a much more innovative and better product before the legislature stepped in and changed it. But I think that at the end of the day, this department really put a tremendous amount of work into that. And I think ours was more creative. I think we don't have to do just that. We can do more than that, which I think we should, whatever we left on the cutting room floor, we should pick it up and continue. But with that said, the department and everybody that was involved in working in that ESSA process and final product and getting it to the feds and redoing it and getting it back to them, I just say we ought to commend everybody for that.
And I hope that Dr. Fabrizio read that it was approved. Because, Dr. Oxenine?
Just quickly,
Okay.
with respect to the, Mr. Johnson, the working group's work, I hope there's some way, I hope has been some discussion about getting this information to our teacher education programs. Because early on, let's say during the 3rd year or the 4th year in teacher preparation, we've got to find, maybe Pepsi is the appropriate forum to have some discussions about how to make our future teachers aware of where we're going as a state board in this venue of social, emotional, and mental health issues.
No, I think it's a good point, and we should find a way to make that connection.
Thank you. It's very important that that awareness begin very soon.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Superintendent. And I note, or our Director of Operations has noted that I skipped something on the agenda, so we'll go back and I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the May 1 through 3, our work session and board meeting of the State Board of Education. Ms. Taylor moves. Mr. Alcorn seconds. All those in favor of approving the minutes say aye.
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 Anybody opposed, no. So board members, we've now come to the consent agenda, and I note to the audience that the consent agenda is primarily items that have come to the board for discussion in a prior month and are not complex or contentious. I note that the board members have seen these materials for at least a week on the consent agenda. If there is no request to remove an item from the consent agenda, I will then ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda. Okay, Mr. Keenan moves, second. Ms. White, and Ms. White, you wanted to note something for the record?
I did. Board members, I wanted to bring it to the attention, and particularly for those in the audience and those who might be listening, that under EICS 14, we had a technical glitch, and the backup materials for the schools that are making that submission didn't match the schools that we reviewed last month, and so that correction's been made. What you're voting on today does reflect the discussion and the schools that we saw last month, and so those materials are now posted correctly on eBoard.
Thank you, Ms. White. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No. The motion's noted for the record. Mr. Duncan abstains. The motion passes. Thank you, board members. We now begin our committee reports and voting on action items. We will begin with the Business Operations Committee. So I recognize Mr. Alcorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Greg Alcorn, Chair of the Business Operations Committee, along with Todd Chastain as Vice Chair. I have one action item, is Op 1, which is a policy amendment to include the program enhancement teacher allotment adjustment on that. We had discussion on that. Ms. Schaus made the presentation on that. I'm going to bring that as a motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Alcorn, second by Ms. Willoughby. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, no. The motion stands approved. Mr. Alcorn.
I have 4 actions on first read. We're moving BizOp 5 up to
Okay.
action on first read, please. BizOp 2 is to approve the digital learning funds and planning, implementation, and Innovation Academy. A presentation by Ms. Brogdon on that, and I understand that we'll have Mr. Duncan and Mr. Keenan will abstain to vote on that, but we bring that to the board to approve.
Okay, motion by Mr. Alcorn, second by Mr. Davis. Note for the record that Mr. Keenan and Mr. Duncan are not voting on this. They abstain. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed, no. Motion stands approved.
BizOp 3 is a report. We heard a report on the state property. It's the initial report, and Nathan Mauney did that for us and presented that to us, and I bring that to the board for approval.
Motion by Mr. Alcorn. Second.
Second.
Okay, second by Ms. White. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Anybody opposed, no. Mr. Alcorn.
BizOp 7 was the pre-approval of Finance and Business Services Policy Manual. It was a late item provided for the board in the minutes. There's a sense of urgency for this to get it started. Mr. Levinson made a presentation on that, and I bring that before the board for approval.
This is BizOp.
7.
Okay, this was a late addition.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Motion to approve BizOp 7, second by Mr. Duncan. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No. Motion stands approved. Mr. Alcorn.
If I jump down to BizOp 5, which is under the discussion, we move that up to action on first read. It is amendment to the clarification for the digital learning initiative that matches up with the BizOp 2. Bring that as a motion to move that to action on first read for approval.
Okay, motion by Mr. Alcorn, second by Mr. Davis. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, no. Motion stands approved. Mr. Alcorn.
Finally, on a discussion item, BizOp 4 was a new program reporting code. Ms. Schaus also made the presentation on relative to the Innovative School District allotments. Bring that as a motion for approval. No, I don't.
No.
That's just a discussion item. Sorry.
Yes. We'll vote on it next.
Yes, sir. We'll vote on that next month.
When we have a conference call.
Yes, sir.
Okay, next month.
And we discussed contracts and answered the question from that was the open issue as far as item number 8. And that concludes the report and for our committee.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Alcorn. Now we move to the Educator Standards and Practices Committee, and I recognize Dr. Olivia Oxendine.
Thank you, Chairman Kobe. I am Olivia Oxendine, and I chair the ES&P Committee along with Miss Amy White. I have 2 items under action that we will vote on. ES&P 1, this is a revision to the Career Technical Education Manual. This revision was presented to the State Board last month by Mr. John Kirkman. I move that we approve this licensure clarification located in policy Career Technical Education 004.
Motion by Dr. Oxendine, second by
Second.
Ms. White. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, no. Motion stands approved. Dr. Oxendine.
ES&P 2 pertains to the cut score estimates for the EdTPA and the PPAT. This is, the official administration of these assessments will take place in 2019, the academic year 2019 and 2020. I move that we approve the EdTPA and PPAT cut score estimates contained in LICN 003.
Motion by Dr. Oxendine, second by Mr. Alcorn. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, no. Motion stands approved. Dr. Oxendine.
Action on first read, I have two items, ES&P 3. This item was taken care of in closed session yesterday.
Okay.
The next item under action on first read is ES&P 4, preliminary findings from a six-system study presented yesterday by Dr. Tripp Stallings. I move that the State Board of Education receive this report, which will be presented to the General Assembly. And it pertains to the North Carolina pilot on teacher compensation and advanced teaching roles.
And that's ES&P
ES&P 4.
4. Okay. Motion by Dr. Oxendine, second. Second by Ms. Willoughby. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, no. Motion stands approved. Dr. Oxendine.
And a decision was made yesterday to move ES&P 7 to action on first read. It tends to be a bit time sensitive, and this pertains to Charlotte Mecklenburg School System wishing to operate as an EPP, Educator Preparation Program. So I move that we approve the CMS application to operate in this capacity.
Okay.
Second.
ES&P 7. Okay.
ES&P 7.
Okay, motion by Dr. Oxendine, second by Mr. McDevitt. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, no. Motion stands approved.
Under discussion, I have two items. ES&P 5 pertains to LICN 001, and Dr. Tomberlin presented this item to us. It has to do with the residency pathway, which is going to replace the lateral entry pathway. The lateral entry policy work that would be handled by this board will end in 2021. Residency is going to replace that. He presented a flow chart. The purpose of that flow chart has many purposes, but one of those purposes is to present the complexity of licensing educators in North Carolina. So we will act on that item next month. Also under discussion, ES&P. I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. McDevitt, I'm sorry.
Encourage all of us and perhaps DPI to encourage the LEAs to engage in that during this coming month. Because it's out there, it's been out there for a month. And often the feedback we get about this is way after the fact. And so I know they've got the leadership conference where they're all together in late June. There's some opportunity, but traditionally on these we've got very little feedback. But when they're struggling to get the teachers, they haven't engaged in it. So I hope that we can encourage the LEAs during this month to look at that, make sure they are engaged in it, so that later they're going to understand it. Tom, there is a test on this flow chart, is that correct?
Right, I'm working on it.
Okay, so I'm not willing to take the test.
It was very good work presented by Dr. Tomberlin yesterday. And also under, let's see, ES&P, no, I've done ES&P 6. Or have I? No, ES&P 6. Okay, so this pertains to a better way, well, let me go through my notes. Institutionally approved standards control the creation of new courses and program majors. Each university has, approved by the Board of Trustees and the General Administration, a lot of hoops and a lot of rigorous steps that let's say, a school of education, if they want to create a new reading program, it takes sometimes up to a year before a program is approved. So we know that process is already in place. Rather than having the DPI staff go through similar steps and rigorous processes to approve new programs coming from any college or university, college of education or school of education, what we are now asking through ES&P 6 is that institutions present what is called a declaration of assurance. And that will let the department know and the state board know that these new programs or courses or program majors have gone through all the necessary steps at that level, at the institutional level. So what the department will be most interested in is the outcomes and results of those programs. And we have, the State Board of Education has approved a lot of policies that look at that takes a look at the back end of programs, program majors and courses. So next month we will act on that particular item. Does anybody have any questions or need any additional clarification around this policy? Okay, and we'll move on to, we had a new business item yesterday presented by Dr. Martin, Cynthia Martin, and Abe Klein, and this was an update on the latest findings from the Teacher Working Conditions Survey. We found out that about 96,000 teachers completed the survey. The increase since 2004 in the response rate is just very, very impressive. I think in 2004 we had 38% of educators teachers completing the survey. This year we are up to 91%. And probably the bottom line finding that makes me very happy is that 87% of the teachers who completed the survey agree that their school is a good place to work. So that concludes my report for the month.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Oxendine. Ms. White, I recognize you for the Education, Innovation, and Charter School Committee.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Amy White, and I have the pleasure of serving with Mr. Wayne McDevitt to chair the Education, Innovation, and Charter School Committee. We have two actions for item this morning, EICS 1, and then the addition of EICS 11, which is a move yesterday as a result of the discussion, and we'll cover that in just a minute. So EICS 1, Raleigh Oak Charter Schools request to change its originally approved enrollment. Raleigh Oak Charter experienced a high number of applicants during this initial period, and those initial students will allow the school to address the financial need to afford the facility that they're in. So they are requesting that they be allowed with more enrollment and to open as a K-4, not a K-3 school. So I move that the State Board of Education approve Raleigh Oak Charter Schools' request to change its originally approved enrollment.
Second.
Motion by Ms. White, second by Mr. McDevitt. All those in favor say aye. Anybody opposed? No. Motion stands approved. Ms. White.
Thank you very much. Under EICS 11, Union Day Charter Schools request to relocate. This is a situation where Union Day Academy had been operating for 2 years in a temporary facility. They were able to secure a permanent location and have submitted a request to the board to relocate. That is necessary when you move more than 5 miles away from the original location. So after discussion yesterday, I would like to move that Union Day Charter Schools' request to relocate be approved by the State Board.
Okay, this is an action on first read.
Yes, it is.
Motion by Ms. White, second by Mr. Alcorn. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? No. Motion stands approved. Ms. White.
Great. Moving down to EICS 2, the voluntary relinquishment of the charter of Padilla Academy in Cabarrus County. Padilla Academy of Cabarrus had already received a 1-year delay, and in May of 2018, Padilla submitted its request to actually relinquish that charter. So today I would like to ask for the board's vote to approve the voluntary relinquishment of the charter of Padilla.
Motion by Ms. White, second by Ms. Willoughby. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, no. Motion stands approved. Ms. White.
Terrific. EICS 3 is an amendment and rescinding restart applications. Dr. Nancy Barber discussed a request from Washington County Schools to rescind its application for the restart model at Pines Elementary School because of the county's lack of ability to fully fund that model. So today I'm requesting that the board approve this amendment to rescind the restart model at Pines Elementary School.
Motion by Ms. White, second by Ms. Taylor. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed, no. Motion stands approved.
The final action under action on first read is EICS 4, the Innovative School District Criminal Background Check Policy and Process. Board members, this, as you'll recall, is a new policy, and normally we would not approve on first read when we have a policy, but because the ISD is set up as a new LEA, this new policy is necessary to set up background checks needed to be put in place to make those hires. That'll be instrumental in making sure we have the proper personnel in place. It would not normally be approved on first read, but this policy aligns with and is a direct reflection of an existing policy that applies to all other LEAs. And so today I'm asking you to go ahead and approve that new policy for the Innovative School District for criminal background and process.
Motion by Ms. White, second by Mr. McDevitt. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed, no. Ms. White.
We had great discussion on lots of different items. EICS 5 was a discussion about Healthy Start Education, Inc.'s request to transfer its charter to another nonprofit entity. This is two charter schools, and they are going to separate so that they can individually focus on increasing student performance at those schools. We had that for discussion yesterday, and we'll bring that back for a vote next month. EICS 6 was recommended changes for the charter schools performance framework. This is a reflection of some needed changes to the framework which captures school data trends for each year. And the changes include a section for reporting school results under an alternative accountability model. These are for schools that traditionally serve students with many challenges, mental, they're maybe low income, perhaps just students that require a lot of extra attention. So we had that as a great discussion item yesterday. EICS 7 was the final ready to open recommendations for charter schools opening in 2018. There were 13 schools that were on your backup documents that we discussed yesterday. EICS 8 discussed a recommended change to CHTR 016, the charter schools fast track replication policy, and every one of those changes was presented yesterday. Most of them are just technical corrections or grammatical errors that needed to make it possible for us to be able to replicate schools that are doing well in our state. EICS 9 is a new policy recommendation for charter school support and management organizations. This was an important discussion that we had pertaining to the application process for charter schools, submitting approval for to the CSAB that really wanted to provide greater clarity and transparency in the charter school application process. With regard to terms for management organization and charter support organization. In addition, the policy will require that charter schools receive approval from the State Board of Education before partnering with or terminating an existing partnership with management organization. That is a mouthful in a nutshell. We're trying to get a better sense of clarity of who's working with who, what partners are at the table before we approve those charter school applications. I think this will refine the process a little bit and help us know who we're making deals with. Yeah. Okay. EICS 10 is Thomas Academy's proposal to become an alternative charter school. Thomas Academy is located on the campus of the Boys and Girls Home at Lake Waccamaw, and they're wanting to become an alternative charter school with that alternative accountability model that we talked about earlier, using that framework. We moved EICS 11 to action. You voted on that just a few minutes ago. EICS 12 were the restart application submissions for Elizabeth City Middle and P.W. Moore Elementary School. And our final topic of discussion yesterday was with Dr. Eric Hall, and he gave us an update on the Innovative School District, the amazing work that he's doing there to prepare that school for ready to open in August, and an update on the Memorandum of Understanding that he is working with Robeson County School District that deals with issues of nutrition and transportation and who choosing which ball field when and any other thing that you can imagine that they would need to discuss to make sure that there are reciprocal sharing of facilities and resources. And that concludes my report.
Good job.
Great job. You really moved through that, so thank you, Ms. White. Ms. Taylor, I recognize you for the Student Learning and Achievement Committee.
Thank you, Chairman Kobe. I am Becky Taylor, and I, along with Dr. Olivia Holmes Oxendine, my vice chair, oversee the Student Learning and Achievement Committee. We do have 6 action items this morning. All of these basically are regarding some tweaking to some policies to come in line with state statute or either for some clarity on some certain issues. The first 3 were presented last month and are pretty standard edits that they made or changes. So I'm going to go ahead and move that we accept and approve the policy revisions on the Certified Driver Training Instructors, DRIV-003.
Motion by Ms. Taylor, second by Mr. Keenan. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed, no. The motion stands approved. Ms. Taylor.
SLA 2, once again, dealing with driver education, I move that we approve the policy revisions as presented on driver training requirements, DRIV-004.
Motion by Ms. Taylor, second by Ms. Willoughby. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, no. The motion stands approved. Ms. Taylor.
And SLA 3, once again, I move that we approve the policy revisions as presented regarding the North Carolina Driver Education Advisory Committee, ADVS-008.
Motion by Ms. Taylor, second by Mr. Alcorn. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, no. Motion stands approved. Ms. Taylor.
SLA 4, this item actually deals with our AIG program standards, and it is an update. All the school districts were given opportunities to comment on these guidelines over the past 10 months, actually. And so we did have some input, and the purpose of these standards really is to serve as official guidelines for our local AIG plans. So I do move that the State Board of Education approve the revisions to the North Carolina AIG program standards as presented.
Motion by Ms. Taylor, second by Ms. White. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed, no. Motion stands approved. Ms. Taylor.
SLA 5, amendment to course for credit policy, CCRE-001, credit recovery updates. And again, this was presented last month. And at this time, I do ask that we approve this policy as presented at the June meeting today.
Motion by Ms. Taylor, second by Mr. Duncan. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, no. Ms. Taylor.
And then our final policy amendment is regarding the homeless students. And this item has been one of high interest to us in the past couple of months, and we appreciate Ms. Donna Brown bringing us all the information. I do move that the State Board of Education approve the policy amendments as stated.
Motion by Ms. Taylor, second by Mr. Duncan. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, no. Motion stands approved. Ms. Taylor.
We had 3 items of new business yesterday. The first one, yesterday we had Chief Academic Officer Dr. Stacy Wilson Norman along with Ms. Chrissy Lynn Ebert update us on what is going on with the standards, the implementation update. I think we were all very impressed with what has happened, the efforts that have been put in working with our districts as we prepare for this implementation year in our school districts. I think the surveys that we've received from our folks in the field are clearly stating that we're doing a good job with implementation, and that feels good to all of us. So it is clear that everyone has worked very hard on this, and I certainly hope that our school systems, as they prepare for the initial implementation in the 2018-19 school year, know that we're here to provide continuous support. And so I appreciate all the work from our DPI staff on this item. Good report on the update. Our next item of new business regards our North Carolina virtual public schools. And this item basically was to share with us the continuous improvement efforts. And once again, Dr. Stacy Wilson Norman shared the many improvements regarding quality, and I appreciate that Superintendent shared the article that was just out, recognizing our efforts and focus on quality in this area. Also, there have been many changes regarding training, teacher training, course content, and just ongoing tweaking everything so that we continue to be better and better. We certainly do a great job with NCVPS. Our numbers are increasing year to year. I think we're serving a unique population with this, and we appreciate the work from Dr. Liz Colbert and her team on all of their efforts here. Our third item of new business was our Read to Achieve update, and it was nice to have Dr. Pamela Shue present. She's our Associate Superintendent for Early Education, sharing information on some of the new initiatives that are rolling out. And specifically, the one that I was impressed with is the Wolfpack Works, which looks like we're going to have a wealth of people out in the field providing support to our teachers, especially the beginning teachers, K-12, K-2. Yeah, our K-2 beginning teachers are going to receive a lot of support, professional development, help with M-Class, weekly coaching, and several other things that are going on. And I know we're going to hear more and more as we move through the summer preparing for the school year, and I certainly appreciate all the efforts that Dr. Pamela Shue and her staff have been working on. And Chairman Kobe, that does conclude SLA.
Well, I'll turn to you again.
Okay.
For the Special Committee on Digital Learning.
Okay. Once again, thank you. I am Becky Taylor, and I serve as the Vice Chair for the Special Committee on Digital Learning. And in our Chair's absence, Lieutenant Governor could not be here today. I'm delighted to present a summary of what we had yesterday. Ms. Verna Labahari introduced the item and shared with us some of the exciting things that they're doing with the dashboard and information that our policymakers and we can look at, frequently to see how our schools are doing. She introduced also Dr. Jenny Korn from the Friday Institute, which we're always excited to hear from her. The Friday Institute partners with us so well, and I do appreciate Verna coordinating and leading these efforts. We were excited to meet a new member, Dr. Brooks Bowden, who will be taking on some of the evaluation portions of this. She's also from NC State College of Education, and she highlighted, along with Dr. Korn, some of the districts that are willing to step up and assist this summer. There are 5 districts that I'd like to recognize. They have been leaders in the field of digital learning. Rowan Salisbury, New Hanover County, Rutherford County, Greene County, and Mooresville Graded School District. These 5 have always kind of been trailblazers in this area, and we appreciate them taking the time to work over the summer and coordinate and help us learn more of how we can all move forward in that direction. And then also we had a final reminder too. We were a little concerned that we had not received quite enough feedback from our districts on the digital learning progress rubric, and so we did bring it to the attention and reminded staff that this was approved in 2015 to make this a requirement of our district. So I believe that that's going to be communicated with the districts fairly quickly so that we can get this information in. We had 100% response in 2015, and that's what we expect to have again this time. Lots of good information. I won't go through it all. You can read the PowerPoint, but again, we just thank everyone here that's working on it, Verna and her staff, and Friday Institute, as well as NC State at this time. So that concludes our Digital Learning Committee report.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Taylor, and thanks to the staff and the presenters yesterday and today for all the work you put into the presentations. And board members, that now concludes our committee meetings for this month. And we are running way ahead of schedule, and which I love short meetings. But is she, huh?
Go ahead with that.
Yeah, well, I thought maybe we'd take a 10-minute break.
Yeah, that'd be good.
And if you could, here's the deal. Here's the deal. Cecilia isn't scheduled to report for about an hour. So being the diligent person she is, she's over at the legislature working on our behalf. And so maybe, Deanna, you can see if she can make it over here in 10 minutes, and then we'll hear from Mr. Levinson and Ms. Holden. Okay? 10-minute break. Okay, we're ready to proceed, and Ms. Holden, I told the board that you are hard at work over at the legislature, and we appreciate you literally running over. And
Be kind.
but we're always kind. So we thank you for running over, and we'll hear from you first, and then we'll hear from Mr. Levins.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you on a legislative update. As you know, things are going very, very quickly across the way. We have already met on 2 bills this morning, have meetings on other bills this morning, and so I'll bring to you the latest and the greatest, because even what you received as of last night or this morning may have additional updates. So I'll start. Yesterday there were several questions, and I tried to respond via email when I was in committee meetings. One of the questions that was posed was there anything in the budget as it pertains to mental health, homelessness? And so what we will do, I sent this to Vice Chair Davis, and I'll send it to the rest of the committee after the meeting today. There were 3 items that are in the DHHS budget specific to homelessness. There was nothing specific in the state budget that was an expansion item for the Department of Public Instruction. So I'll send you what was in the HHS budget for that. So, Deanna, I am going to make the assumption that they have the materials that I sent late last evening, and I apologize for the lateness of that, but as you know, things are moving. So I'll start with, the governor did veto the budget yesterday. The budget came out a couple of weeks ago, or I guess not even quite that. The governor vetoed the budget, so now it gets kicked back over to the General Assembly, and they can either veto it or make changes. I mean, they can override the veto, or they can make changes and send it back. So we will see what happens in the coming days on that. In terms of the bills that can be filed, today was the last day that local bills can be filed by the House and the Senate, so we can start beginning to see a little bit more, I'll say, stability in regards to the amount of bills coming through that are new bills. There are still some eligible bills that can be filed, and if you look at the sheet that I sent forward, it points those out in highlights. There's a couple that might impact the state board or the department that I'll point out specifically. The first is that there's no deadline for them to file bills that amend the North Carolina Constitution, and there are no restrictions or deadlines around bills responding to litigation related to legality of legislative enactments. So I point those 2 out if there's any impact here. The other thing is the rest of this short session, they also can take action as it pertains to appointments to confirmation of members for state boards or commissions, which might also apply to some of the vacancies for the state board or those that are moving off, hopefully not. Otherwise, the bills that are eligible for consideration that we'll talk through are those bills that made crossover, veto overrides. What I've attempted to do for today is to highlight the ones where I'm seeing traction, movement, or those where the department has weighed in based on input that we might want them to use to craft better legislation. So I'll start with pointing out House Bill 514. That is a bill that's been very public, and this pertains to permitting municipals, charter schools for certain towns. This is specific to Cornelius, Huntersville, Matthews, and Mint Hill. There was a provision in the budget that corrected one of the items that would not have allowed this to work. And then now that that provision was in Senate Bill 99, that allowed for municipalities to be able to fund public schools, including charters. In addition to that, House Bill 514 is now law because it was a local bill and it was passed by both the House and the Senate. There is one piece of information that was not included in either Senate Bill 99, and it was also not included in House Bill 514. That would be instrumental in moving this forward, and that is currently teachers for those charters would not be eligible for participating in the teasers or the teacher and state employee retirement system. And because they are 10-month employees, they're not eligible for local government retirement system either. So the way that the General Assembly would fix that is if that came through in a different budget bill this session.
That would be a state bill, not a local bill, right?
That would have to be a state bill. Thank you. And I apologize. I think that's my phone. If somebody can take my pocketbook out of here. I'm glad I was not in the committee meeting for that. Okay, the next is House Bill 933. And they are actually having a committee meeting on this bill right now, and we have representation at the committee. They will not take a vote on it, but this bill speaks specifically to reciprocity agreement for school psychologists. And so what this would allow is if a individual holds a national credential, it would automatically make them eligible to receive a license underneath the State Board of Education. And we did weigh in on that bill, and they added one component to it that would have expedited that will expedite the process of licensure, and that is that the State Board would need to issue that license within a 60-day window. So there'll be some details in terms of the process that will need to be worked out to make sure that with all of the licenses that are being reviewed, that somehow that those meet that particular time period. There are 31 other states that are already doing that, so it would make us the 32nd state. The next is House Bill 934, and then also House Bill 938. We have done an extensive amount of work around these, and we've had the Center for Safer Schools weighing in. We've had several different individuals across the agency that have been weighing in to make these stronger bills. These speak to the peer-to-peer mentoring programs, and it speaks to having annual facility vulnerability assessments. So there's several different components in there. Also in the state budget, one of the items that was spelled out in the safety that's also referenced in these bills pertains to the anonymous tip line. So basically schools will end up with an anonymous tip line. The state will receive funding so that we can offer a statewide solution around that. The next two bills, one is Senate Bill 756 and House Bill 1039. We have provided input. We had the General Counsel, we had our insurance experts, and we've provided input on what this may mean. If schools are allowed to also have teachers carry weapons in the school system. So we've provided input on behalf of the agency. I'm happy to share any information that we did provide to the General Assembly around this one. The next is House Bill 986, Revised Cursive and Multiplication Report. And there was another piece of a different bill that we had weighed in on that they actually included in House Bill 986. Originally, House Bill 1048 had come out, and thankfully some input that was provided by our agency led to them revising the language and including a portion in House Bill 986 that actually made it for a much stronger bill, and that was specifically talking about students who made a 5 on the end of grade math test would move to advanced classes for the next school year. Parents or guardians can opt them out if they would like. The next is around the individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And Senate Bill 760 basically directs for Government Data Analytics Center, or also known as GDAC under the Department of Information Technology, to establish a task force that would study the collection and use of data on education and employment outcomes specific to that population. The next is House Bill 965, and this would require the display of national and state mottos in prominent locations in all public schools that currently are also required to display the United States and North Carolina flags and to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. It appropriates $25,000 for the implementation of that act. The next is Senate Bill 765. We provided input around this one also, and this is specific to one school district, which would be your Chapel Hill Carborough schools. And what it would do is exempt that particular school system from state requirements to include class rank on transcripts. And so that would create some inconsistencies across the state, but it would also require some modifications to our software. So we provided input on that one. The next one is the Cherokee this is a Cherokee plate, license plate, as well as a teaching agreement. And this was something that I know that our agency has spoken with different individuals about. What it would do is it allows the Cherokee language to be taught in our schools, and for the teachers of that language to not, they would be exempt basically from your traditional licensure process and the 4-year degree requirement. And the premise behind that is that particular native language is something where a lot of the people who know the language don't necessarily have college degrees to be able to teach that. It would not allow those individuals to teach other classes in the schools, but only to teach that one. And that would be a complementary bill to one that was passed a few years back that actually recognizes that language by universities in the state.
Let me ask just a second about that one, if that's okay.
Certainly.
30 seconds on that. We created, as part of the Cherokee agreement, the compact that created the gaming compact for the state of North Carolina. We created Cherokee Preservation Foundation, I'm going to say 20-some years ago, and it puts about $10 million a year. A lot of that money, the language was being lost. In fact, some of the elders were the only ones that could speak the language, and it was just beginning to go away, and there was a lot of fear. So a lot of money, and even immersion in the school, the tribal school, the school on the at the tribe. So there are now kids that were 6, 7, and 8 20 years ago that are now fluent in the language because of a lot of work over the past 20 years. I'd be very much in favor of allowing, because as I understand it, the only thing that they would really work with another teacher to teach that language. Is that right?
This would be them actually being able to teach that language, but they couldn't teach anything else in the school other than that language. And it would work through the state superintendent to bring an MOU forward for the state board to approve. So it would be with input from this agency.
Now, when you said something about the IHEs accepting that, you're not saying they would accept that as a requirement of the foreign language?
Well, it's my understanding that they do now accept that as a foreign language. So I'll send you the bill number on that one.
Yeah, I can pull it up. I just,
Okay.
But it keeps getting amended. It's amending an old bill that's adding this in, and
That was a separate bill, the one that allowed it to be a foreign language by the universities.
Yeah, and there was some debate about that, but I didn't know the Cherokee. I know there was about sign language being included in that, but.
And
so.
Helga, if you're here, yeah, you want to, if you have any
And they're
questions,
kind of
Helga's
changing
been.
that to world languages instead of foreign language, and so there's a lot of, oh yeah, there's Helga.
She's been involved in this for quite some time.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Helga Fasciano, Special Assistant for Global Education. So this has been evolving, and we have been, as an agency, working with the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians on this issue. Thanks to the compact that Mr. McDevitt referred to, they have established their own Katua Academy, which is noted nationwide as a preservation of the language. And we've also been working with them to recognize how could they potentially certify their own elders. In other words, recognize that, yes, they are proficient in the Cherokee language. They are a sovereign nation, and they are the only ones that have that capacity. They have worked to align a certification test or assessment with what we use here with the State Board of Education in recognizing our own world language teachers. So that is lining it up and making sure it's in alignment with the actual proficiency scale. They have been doing that work all along, so they're ready to certify and say who the elders are. And this is also to preserve, they do have students that are coming through the ranks. Some are going to Western Carolina and receiving that particular program in their arsenal as well. But this allows them to continue that preservation work. And I think one of the considerations moving forward with our state board in looking at any MOU is to, encourage them to continue to develop those language speakers that would then also come through with bachelor's degrees in the
Well, I don't
future.
wanna overdo it here. I'm delighted you're engaged. You've already said what I wanted to make sure and assure that as part of that process, there's some sensitivity has been around the word foreign language as opposed to world languages. And I heard you 2 or 3 times there say something about world languages, and
Yes, sir.
that's and regardless of how they feel, I think their sensitivity ought to be heard.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you, Helga. The next bill is Senate Bill 15, and I know that Eric Hall shared input on that yesterday. If anybody has any questions on it, I'm happy to entertain any questions around it. I know that we will be working with legislators. There were a couple of concerns that were brought forward from stakeholders, so we will be working to try to make sure that we address those concerns while also making sure that we do what is necessary in order for the ISD to be operational and not have teachers or principals who are impacted negatively between now and when we meet again in the long session. One of the things that I'll bring to your attention, I will not go into any level of detail. I put together a spreadsheet and I tried to put it so that it was more personalized for you, and it shows any specific funding that was received in the budget that was for your region. And then I also included any local bills that are specific to your region. And if you would like to send me an email or call me and ask about any of those offline, I'm happy to address those. Many of them were small numbers, but I thought that you might want to know since it was specific to your area of the state that you represent. So I will move quickly through. There were some high-profile provisions that were also included in the budget. Adam will address the budget from a numbers perspective. I'll speak to any of the provisions that I think the State Board would want to know about. Although this was in some regards specific to numbers, I'll point out that we did get the hold harmless extended for the principal pay. So we have that for another year, and they did it for the extra year just because it was a biennium budget. So then we will go back and ask for that same thing again in the long session. The next was there were 2 principal bonuses, and they restructured those and combined them. And then they also, what they did is they allowed for those teachers who had principals that had were in the top 50% growth to receive a bonus, and those that were in a D or an F school received double the bonus. So the goal there is to try to begin to drive principals towards the low-performing schools and be compensated for that work. And then finally, I don't know if Adam will get into the details on this one, but they did move the pay plan from the current July to June. They moved it to a January to December timeframe. And the reason for that is because when principals were entering into their school years, they did not have growth, and they didn't have the growth data, and they didn't have the ADM data to be able to set their salary at the beginning of the school year. So this will allow them to do that without having to do retroactive or having to do clawbacks if a principal was overpaid and because their growth went down, et cetera. So this hopefully will streamline. Alexis was wonderful in working with me at the General Assembly to try to make that happen. The next is, this was a big win for us. We extended the Career and College Ready graduate program and moved the full implementation to 2021. And that was in regards to offering remediation courses in the high schools. So this was another partnership where we were able to get that extension. I think you heard about the virtual charter school extension yesterday. It went from a 4-year to an 8-year pilot. And then once the 8 years is up, they will not have to reapply in terms of submitting a brand new application, but the State Board will have the opportunity through CSAB to extend that charter if they so choose.
So it's not a pilot, really?
Driver's ed.
That was the right answer. That was the right answer, Cecilia. You have to be right.
Yes.
Driver's ed, this one was interesting. So there's the fund bucket there for driver's ed cannot transfer out of the driver's education allotment. And then the other piece is if local school administrative units fail to comply with the reporting requirements that are necessary for the strategic plan implementation, then DPI is allowed to withhold 5% of the driver's ed funding for that unit until the report is submitted.
The Innovation School District can now serve as an operator if required. The reason for that particular provision was in the event that you're in the middle of a school year and the operator is not working out, at least there's a fallback plan without leaving that school in a vulnerable position. There's $3 million that allows the department to implement necessary budget reductions, for example, covering severance or contract renegotiations as part of our $5.1 million in cuts. There were 3 things in there that I'll touch on briefly on the human resources legislation that I think would be beneficial to the agency. One is that it would offer for the Council of State Agencies and for the Council of State Agencies to be able to set the salaries for exempt positions, managerial, and also policymaking exempt employees as compared to having to go through OSHR for that process. And I believe, if I recall correctly, that it also offers within the salary range plus 10%, if I think that's correct. I need to confirm that. The other is Council of State is not required to go through Temp Solutions. Temp Solutions is the OSHR version that handles our temporary employees, and they charge, I think it's a $3 additional per hour fee, so maybe if we don't go through them, we might be able to reduce some overhead in that capacity. And then we did get the special annual leave bonus, and one of the tech corrects that we'll be asking for is for public school employees to also get that special 5-day leave. They were eliminated, but I don't know that it was intentional, so we're asking for that. The DPI was given funds, and in this budget it says that DPI is to contract with schools that lead for professional development for teachers and principals for up to 60 schools. As you probably are aware, the State Board of Education, effective July the 1st, will be required to do roll call votes. The regional school withdrawal moratorium, there's a regional school, and they are not allowed to withdraw unless the General Assembly comes back with a statutory process for the withdrawal. So if you're participating in that regional school at this time, then there's not a withdrawal process, but that will be worked out through the General Assembly. Military children can now enroll prior to their residency in North Carolina. They have extended the Finance Reform Study Committee to 2019. That is the task force that is reviewing school funding, and they've given them till 2019 to bring back any recommendations on the way that our school funding is allotted. Charter School Transportation Grant, we did not receive an extension on that grant. They have requested a report during the interim on the effectiveness of that grant program. And then they extended the Advanced Teaching Role pilot by 5 years, and now it's a total of 8 years. So with that, I'm going to go to try to cover, yes?
Oh, sorry, I didn't
That's
mean to
okay.
cut you off.
That's okay.
I had a question about the budget process. So as it was passed as a conference report, it meant that members could not propose amendments to it and have those amendments voted on. Does that change now that the governor has vetoed it? Does it go?
No. Up or down on veto.
Or is that?
It's up or down on veto.
It's
Okay.
up or down.
So, okay.
They can change the bill. They can change the bill and send it
That's,
back. to
that's
the-
my question, is can they make changes to it? And
They can, and then the governor would have an opportunity to sign or veto there.
okay.
They could also apply their same rules relative to amendments and, to the bill. I mean, they can change it, but they could also apply the rule that they just applied, that there'll be no amendments in committee or.
But if they chose to, they
Say it
could.
differently, they can do what they want to do.
Okay, all right. That's my question, yes. Okay, thank you.
I'll hit some very high-level technical corrections that we are still requesting in a variety of ways. Some are through the budget tech corrects, others we're trying to get them in different bills, but these are high-profile items, especially for the state board. One in particular is when we had to revise the ESSA plan, it required a state legislative change. So we have been partnering with them to try to make sure that that legislative change ends up in there. It did not end up in the budget. I understand that they are planning to take something forward so that that will correct it. As you know, our ESSA plan was approved, but that was with the revision that now requires the state legislative change. So we're working on that. Another one is in regards to the licensure test process requirements. So currently you have an initial license that's issued to your new teachers. They get a 3-year license. In the first year of that 3 years, they're required to take the test. They're required by the second year to pass the test. And this is something that is causing angst in the local districts for the human resources directors and also for the ability to fill some of the teaching roles. And the state board made a decision to allow them through August, I think 15th, because that's the last date that the test is available to be taken. School districts did not have to allow their teachers all the way through August. But you can imagine if you give the full 2-year window and you have a teacher who is now coming up on their second year, and if they don't pass the test, and if a school is planning on that teacher being there, then this is going to create a problem if they have not yet passed the test. So we're working with the General Assembly in hopes to try to at least move this out for a year and then work through whatever we need to for the longer term. But this is going to be a problem that hits the schools in August if we're not able to get some changes there. The principal pay goal, currently by us moving it to the January-December timeframe, there's a group of principals that still fell through the cracks, if you will. If they are 2-year principals and they're new in their positions, and they would have received the growth for that July to December time period, we're trying to make sure they get paid, so hopefully we'll see a tech correct come through that. School safety grants, charters were not included, we're asking for that. As I mentioned, we're asking for the public schools to get the 5-day vacation. Education Workforce Innovation Commission, we're requesting that the state board chair and superintendent be allowed to ask for a designee to sit in, and this is a state board request. I'm not sure if the superintendent would like that as well, but we are trying to make sure that whenever the commission meets that we have enough members present to be able to vote on the grants that are there. The Pepsi Commission currently does not have staggered terms. They have 2-year term limits, and so since everybody came on at the same time, everybody's slated to move off at the same time, so we're asking for a staggered term for the Pepsi Commission members. Textbook allotment, digital resources allotment, as of July the 1st, there will be no transfers allowed out of that allotment, and so we are requesting that they include digital devices and digital learning professional development in the definition, or that they allow that to continue. What we're seeing, and this was a presentation that was given to the state board, is that the actual hard copy of textbooks is declining because a lot of people are going to your digital content, and we don't want to see a reverse trend there because they're not allowed to move the money outside of that. You can currently purchase hard copy textbooks, or you can purchase digital content, but you're not allowed to purchase the devices that the content would be used on. ACT has been legislated to be part of the diploma endorsement requirement. And so in this particular case, the criteria and the endorsements are harder to get than it's actually required at the UNC school because of the ACT requirements there. And so we're concerned that it will actually reduce the number of diploma endorsements, so we're asking for that to be tweaked. The digital learning grants that have been given out to the districts that you all have voted on, we're requesting that that money not revert back if they have not spent those monies. And while OSBM can offer us that, it would be nice if it's also legislated and then it's not questioning for the school districts.
So is that why, if we're not spending it, they moved a significant part of that from recurring to non-recurring?
That is correct. 2.4 million moved from from recurring to non-recurring. However, these are grants that were given out. They had some grants that you all have awarded already.
I know, yeah. I'm concerned about the pipeline.
Right.
Both of applicants and assuring that that money continues to be there if we're going to focus on this.
Thank you. And then finally, cybersecurity is we are requesting that we did not get any funding for the cybersecurity for the schools. And so what we're requesting is that a specific fund bucket be allowed to be used for that purpose as well in order to meet that need for the schools, because we've had several vulnerabilities in the school districts that have cost them a lot of money over the year and over the years. And cybersecurity is critical, to say the least. So with that, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to entertain those, but otherwise I'll turn it over to Adam to go through the numbers portion.
You have questions?
I'm just, as you can imagine, I was very disappointed to see the supplanting of the early childhood funds that we thought we were going to get from the state, and they allowed the federal dollars to supplant their what I would have considered a promise for more funds for early childhood. What was the discussion around that, or was there any discussion around that?
I did not have any discussion or any input on that. I don't know if any others did, but I did not.
It's very disappointing.
Just points of clarification. I raised with the superintendents the issue of cursive writing, and every one of them said, there's no prohibition, we're doing it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I know this changes the report, but, you know, they were, the other thing, I heard you say that you were, maybe I heard this correctly, that you were expressing or giving information regarding guns in the hands of teachers, or arming teachers, whatever, how you want to word that. I agree with the superintendent that that's not something we want to do. What are we saying to them?
We addressed it from we had the general counsel working with us, and we addressed it from that perspective in terms of the liability for the school and as well as for insurance purposes. So, Eric, if you would like to speak any further on that, I'm happy to do it, and I'm happy to share with you. We provided pretty extensive input on it.
I'm sure y'all are on top of that part of it. I just,
Okay.
I'm not going to force the issue in terms of a position here. I just think that we've reflected that around this table, and I think it's a much bigger, broader, deeper conversation. That's not the answer.
Mr. Davis.
Ms. Holden, are there any discussions of amendments to the state constitution that would impact this board?
Every day I hear a different answer.
Okay. But nothing more than just discussion, not in any form of a bill, proposed bill, draft bill?
That is correct.
I see that they can, that part is outside of the deadline, right? Constitutional changes are outside the deadline of today.
Correct.
And I see that adjournment is also outside of the deadline. Are they going to adjourn sine die? Do you know?
I do not know.
Don't know. And that means basically that they adjourn the session. They're not coming back. And unless it's a called session for a specific purpose.
Dark of night.
Yeah, there's a lot to do here. On, I just would like to say this on the roll call and recording of votes. At least the way I have operated for all these years, every vote has been recorded. Every vote has been recorded. Every member that's ever sat at this table has been very conscientious about recusing appropriately. I don't know if anybody, you know, I thought a few members voted wrong every now and then. They're entitled. They're entitled to vote wrong. But I don't know of anybody that ever was not transparent about that. And they've always been recorded. And so I just want to make that point that somehow within that, I don't think that rhetoric was there, but somehow within all of that, I don't mind roll call. We all support it, but it will make the chair's job harder and extend our meetings a little bit. And yeah,
The secretary's job harder.
yeah. So anyway, I think that somehow the implication there, I want to be real clear. I don't know of anyone that's not been transparent. Anyone.
No, in fact, if it's not unanimous, we note
Yes.
whoever voted against it,
Yep.
a motion. But
But they're recorded.
that's technically not roll call.
That's right. It's recorded. The bill says roll call and recorded. And I just want to make clear, it has always been recorded. And we've had some roll call votes. We've even had ballots over the years, back when we had a ceiling of 100 charters, and we would have maybe 3 vacancies and 7 applicants. We actually did those by ballot, and they were public. You can still go back and look at those ballots, and so.
And textbook votes were always roll call,
Yes.
so. I just think that's
So
an
we do
interesting
roll call.
implication that,
Well, I would hope that could be corrected by a technical correction, because I'm not sure it's addressed for open session. It may be a matter of closed session, which at some point in time, some votes in closed session are available to the public.
I'm fine there too.
me too.
What?
I'm fine
Yeah.
there too. I
too.
mean,
If I can't own my vote, I shouldn't be voting.
I'm okay,
Right.
just as long as there's clarity and transparency. I don't
I
mind.
just think the implication is.
Just out of curiosity, does the definition of roll call include electronic voting in this day and age, or is that outside?
That would be an
They do it.
option. No, roll call could be done electronically, yes. In my opinion, I don't know what legal counsel says. But we've thought of strategies of how to address this.
No.
And
My slide.
we've got ideas.
Well, next month, if we meet by phone, let's keep the agenda as short as possible. Roll calls.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to comment on one bill you're talking about the flag and students, pledging or standing or whatever. One concern that I can see already, I'm on the local school board as well, and then, of course, the local board's gonna have to deal with the issue. It talks about the flag, and of course, I personally respect that, but also says that a student can't be compelled to do that, okay? So what happens when most of the kids, some are standing, some not? You're gonna have chaos. What happens when the students decide not to stand? Because the statute says you don't have to. So that teacher has to be willing to understand that too. So at the local level, we will have to deal with those issues because a teacher's personal feelings can't dictate that student's right not to stand or honor, so those kind of issues I can see coming already, and I guess the point I'm trying to make is, I hope we continue to make laws that are not divisive, but put us together. And that law can really cause some divisiveness, because of course we all know that that is an issue throughout America now, where you stand or whether you sit or whatever. And I just foresee that as being a big problem in our school system with wasting time. That time should be spent on instruction, or not to decide whether or not that kid is right or wrong by sitting in that chair. And I just want to point that out.
Cecilia, I asked, this might be an Adam question, but I asked earlier this morning about the Suicide Prevention Center.
Yes.
They eliminated those funds, is that right?
Those funds were, if I understand this correctly, they were historically included in a different agency budget, and they were not in this budget, but I think that that was unintentional, and I think that they are working to correct that.
Okay.
I don't have any more information than that at this time.
Okay, anything else?
Nope, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Holden, and you may want to go on back.
Yes, sir, thank you so much.
Thanks. And anybody who wants to address something to Ms. Holden offline, of course, you're very welcome to do that. Mr. Levinson.
Thank you. Good morning. Ms. Holden was very thorough, so I'm going to try to not duplicate some of the things she mentioned. First thing I do want to mention is that we have some information out on our website that is more detailed and thorough than what I'm going to discuss today. I really just wanted to bring to your attention some of the more significant items based on what you put in your request and based on your discussion that you typically have. But I do want to acknowledge that Ms. Schaus, who you know well, has worked very hard in the midst of barreling headlong toward year-end closeout to produce materials that are very thorough and that have more detail about each of the items in the money report and then also the provisions, some of which Ms. Holden addressed and some of which you might want to read about. So if you do want to find that material, it is on the Financial and Business Services website, which is just ncpublicsschools.org/FBS. And right under the What's New are a couple of documents that summarize the budget. What I have for you today is sort of an excerpt from that, just to bring to your attention some of the more significant items. So your request in your budget letter certainly focused on pay increases, and this budget does provide pay increases for all of these employee categories. For teachers and instructional support, their movement up the step was funded, and I say that because in some prior years it hasn't always been funded, so it's not a given. But the movement up the step in experience was funded, and then the scales themselves, or the schedule themselves, were increased. Principals, you heard a little bit about some of the adjustments to the legislation and the mechanics of it. One key is that those schedules increased by 6.9%, so they're funded higher. And the bonuses, in addition to the mechanics changing a little bit, those were increased as well. And then, of course, you heard that the hold harmless was extended. Assistant principals, this was in the budget last year, that there was a plan to increase the scale to be the A teacher scale plus 19%. It had been plus 17% last year. The 19% is now in the budget. It was not changed. For non-certified personnel, so your custodians, clerical, and other employees at the local level, not in those categories above, and central office staff received a 2% pay increase. Bus drivers, who, if you'll recall, typically are in that non-certified category, but were funded separately last year with a special appropriation that was for the districts to use in a discretionary way to increase pay on an equitable basis. There's an additional pot of money given for that effort. So again, they're not included in the 2%, but there is additional recurring funding to be distributed as it was last year. So we don't know exactly what that means for any particular bus driver. And then, of course, state employees, you've probably heard, receive a 2% increase or an increase to raise the salary to a minimum of $31,200, and there are 5 bonus leave days granted.
May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So the non-certified and central office employees that have a 2% increase, does that same guarantee of hourly rate, basically, is what they tried to say, that goes to other state employees apply?
That is not in effect for the local school employees. That provision was only for state employees.
I just appreciated Mr. Duncan's comments yesterday about what we pay our non-certified folks, and want to make sure everybody knows they were excluded from that other provision.
Any other questions about the pay increases before I move on? All right. You, of course, had a focus on school safety in your request, and the budget does fund a number of items regarding school safety. The School Safety Grants Program is an umbrella, if you will, that includes some sub-grant programs. As you see here, for school resource officers, that was an existing program that had $7 million in recurring. This has added $5 million in recurring for that. Funding for students in crisis, funding for training to increase school safety, for safety equipment, and for school mental health support personnel. The superintendent has mentioned some of these earlier, and here you see the funding amounts that go along with those. And the superintendent's office will be coming out with the various application processes for these. I believe the legislation says by August 1st. And then the statewide anonymous safety.
It is that those monies are non-recurring, right?
They are, except for the school resource officers grant program.
Okay.
What's that look like?
Yeah.
What's mental health support personnel for 1 year, $10 million? Who do you get to do it? Is that an outsource? Is that you call manpower?
Temp Solutions.
How do you do that for a year?
I know.
You start August, what is it? It started in August.
No.
I don't know what it looks like.
Yeah.
Is there a description of what it looks like?
It's non-recurring.
Well, there'll be an application process that the superintendent's office is charged with creating. So I think there's still some details to be worked out. I don't know if the superintendent would like to speak to it or no. Okay.
Too early to tell.
Yeah, this is the start of the process of putting out, the grant applications, wanting to see what comes back from the districts so we can listen to them and hear what their needs are, then being able to report that back, whether it gets funded through a grant or not, report that back to the General Assembly and let them know all the needs that are out there through that process as well. And there's already work going on how these numbers will increase during the long session next summer.
In a recurring way, I hope.
Yes.
There have been a number of reports that students are identified as in crisis, along the lines of some of the stories we've read. And despite the best efforts, the way the system's currently set up for mental health through DHHS, or even private providers, that after being identified as in crisis, whether or not could just be crisis because harm to self as opposed to harm to others, unable to get services on an expedited basis even after that kind of identification. So I make that comment only to say I think DHHS is a very important part of this, and I was glad to see you had on the task force DHHS folks, because I think this is a place we really need to collaborate, to have available the need to, on a sustaining basis, to address these very important issues.
Yes, and we can get you the language from the budget as well. There's actually directions in the budget that my office is to work with DPI, with the Center for Safer Schools, with DHHS. This will definitely be a very collaborative effort, cross-cutting agency, because we know it's going to take that collaborative effort to have more generalized success in these measures to really identify those issues and stop them from becoming tragedies.
Yeah, that net's very important because we don't have the security of the net that we all desperately want to have right now.
I hope that it never becomes urgent, a crisis that we're saying,
Adam, go ahead.
we're gonna get these things 2 or 3 years out, and we're just not dealing with this.
All right.
And I don't mean just this board, I mean this state, the society.
Keep making recommendations.
The last item on this page, this statewide anonymous safety tip line. You're, I think, aware of the essentially pilot program that has been operated by the Center for Safer Schools, and this funding is to extend that statewide. In terms of funding to go out to districts and schools, it's a mix of allotments and other programs to provide services to schools. There's a note in the budget about program enhancement teachers. This was not expansion per se in this budget, it was in the base budget, but appropriate to note that if you recall from a different bill that happened during the interim, there was additional funding added to the teacher allotment, approximately 950 additional teachers in the base budget to reflect the program enhancement teacher, new program enhancement teacher allotment that is ramping up. Central office, there was a second year of reductions similar to the DPI 2-year flexibility reduction. The central office one remained in the budget as well, so $4 million reduced from central office on top of 7 that had been reduced last year. Textbooks and digital resources are level funded. There's some different receipts coming in than last year, but the total amount available for allotment to districts is just under $74 million statewide. The advanced teaching roles pilot, which you heard I believe Mr. Tomberlin, or Dr. Tomberlin speak to yesterday, has been extended by 5 years for a total of 8, and there's some additional funding there. Cooperative Innovative High Schools, whose funding formula was changed last year, and which included some non-recurring funding last year. There was no change to that this year, so what was laid out in last year's budget is now in effect, which is that Tier 3 schools are down 20,000 from where they had been before. They had received 200,000. They got 20,000 each on a non-recurring basis, and that did not get continued, so they're now at 180,000. The 5 schools that you had in your request this year to be approved, 5 new schools, were approved, but they were not funded. And finally, in the school
Just one comment there, please. The Cooperative Innovative High Schools are some of the ones that are maybe, when we look at our graduation rates and our success stories, those schools have incredible results, many of them, most of them. And I just think that's worth noting that once again, we keep talking about pilots. We've been doing Cooperative Innovative High Schools in one form or another. We've called them different things, but since about 2005, right, Adam? Yeah. And so it's not really a pilot anymore. We have a lot of data about the success stories that we hear from those schools. So, we keep funding things and having pilots, and we're not sure how they're working. And we've got things like early childhood and Cooperative Innovative High Schools that are working. We know that, we have the data, and we don't fund them. Go figure.
Adam, we don't administer the Teaching Fellows Program.
We do not.
We do not.
That's through the State Education Assistance Authority.
Right. The provision that shifts $600,000 of that money to the new teacher support program. Do you know anything about that?
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay.
I'd have to
I'm
look
sorry,
it up.
When it's not administered here, I should have, but I can find out. So I don't understand. That might be a good thing. I just can't figure out what that is. There's just fund shift of $600,000. Speaking of things that work, North Teaching Fellows worked for a long time.
Can certainly look into that and get back to you. At the bottom of the page is School Technology Fund, which is funded from lottery proceeds. There is an additional allotment based on over-realized receipts, so an additional $26 million on a non-recurring basis into that fund.
Adam, before you leave that screen,
Yes.
can you, I'm sure you told us last year, but can you refresh my memory why we cut support to our hardworking school districts by $4 million this year? Do you remember why?
You're referring to the central office
Yeah.
reduction? I don't know that I know an explanation for it. I just know that it was, there was a recurring cut of $7 million last year and $4 million this year, and for a total of 11.
Yeah, I don't understand it either, especially knowing the school districts that many of us work in that really need additional support, not less, but thanks.
Give me, if you don't mind, a ballpark figure on, we got $11.9 million increase on textbook and digital resources in this budget. Is that right? Additional $11.9 million?
So last year there was non-recurring funding of 11 point something.
Right.
And so of course
Increase.
Yes, last year. And so that of course then, isn't in this year's budget because it was non-recurring. So the money that's in this year's budget essentially just brings it back to that level. And so the level stays the same.
And so what is that level?
73.9 million total is the allotment.
So we're just a little bit below where we were 9 years ago. We were at about 76 million in 2008, 2009.
I'd have to look that up.
Okay.
I don't have that at hand.
I think my numbers are right.
All right. Ms. Holden mentioned some of these. These are items that have been important to local finance officers and superintendents when we've interacted with them over this year, and have been in discussion, part of the discussion in the commission at the General Assembly that is looking at different ways of funding. And this relates to the use of funding at the district level, referred to as budget flexibility, driver's education funding. A new provision this year says that funds cannot be transferred in or out of that. Children with disabilities funding, limited English proficiency funding. Something that went into effect for this fiscal year from last year's bill is that no funds could be transferred out of those categories. And two things that were in the bill last year but that go into effect July 1, 2018 are that funding cannot be transferred out of the academically and intellectually gifted allotment, and that the textbooks and digital resources, as I think Ms. Holden mentioned, can only be used for that purpose. These are a number of other programs that were given some additional money here. Don't know that I need to, let's see, I talked about a few of them already, I think. Need-based school building capital funding also received some additional money from lottery proceeds. So that number, which had been in the budget for 18-19 at $75 million in last year's bill, is increased by $42 million. And then we get to the items that relate to the department. Of course, we spoke yesterday about the just under $5.1 million reduction, $3 million for associated costs, which will at least assist with severance payments and perhaps timing cost related to figuring out those reductions. You see that the department then was also given $500,000 for recurring for a computer science initiative, $140,000, which you did have in your request, for licensure to add some capacity there. $20,000 recurring to provide operating funds for two of the commissions that the department is tasked with operating, the Charter Schools Advisory Board and the PEPC, which until now have not had operating funds in a budget, so we've been using non-recurring funds each year to cover those. And then, as you've talked about, the digital learning plan, the portion of that being moved to non-recurring.
Another question I have, and I know that it's not on your slides because it really doesn't, it's not this department, but I think there is some overall impact. Do you know offhand, Adam, and if not, you can send it to us, how much the voucher or what are opportunity scholarships funding, was it increased this year?
I believe it is increased this year. I don't have that number offhand, but I can certainly get that for you.
In a Friday update, maybe, Dr.
Sure.
Townsend Smith. Would be just interesting ancillary information.
We also have $3 million for severance packages, et cetera. That's, just want to point that out. We have, Adam, help me with this. I'm sure I can look again and find this, but you might be able to help me. I have a question from a teacher that's saying, I'm in my 23rd year, and it's my understanding because I'm in my 23rd year, I get nothing. Is that fair to say? I know the veteran teacher thing is a penalty or not funded like the others, but is there a glitch in that, or is it?
So I'd have to look at the salary schedule. I do think that I'm looking at Ms. Schaus, and she says, yes, that is correct. When the schedules are changed, updated, it doesn't necessarily mean that every step is increased. So there are different increases implemented at different parts of the schedule. So for instance, I know that the beginning range was increased this year. The top of the range, the 25 plus level, was in fact increased. So if a teacher is at 25 plus years, they will get, I think it is $700.
But again, I'm going to point out, we just adopted a budget that if for just some reason I guess that would be 1995, you entered the profession. Regardless of anything else, you're the only one on that whole scale that doesn't get a pay increase. Is that correct?
Just that one
Alexis?
step. Michelle?
That's correct. On the salary schedules, they did all go to increments of an annual $1,000 step, and the 23rd to 24th year had no increase. The top of the scale was increased by $700, but the net increase was only $315 because of the veteran bonus last year.
Okay, so there's not an explanation to this person, just that's the way the scale.
Those are the legislative salary schedules,
So,
correct.
okay.
Fine.
Yeah, let Mr. Levinson recognize you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kavanaugh.
Further on that, to just put that in context, I'm looking at the salary schedules right now from 2008, 2009 compared to 2018-19. A 30-year teacher in 2008, 2009 could make $52,550. A 30-year teacher in 2018-19 makes $52,000. So we're 10 years past, and the cap of what a teacher can make in the course of their career has actually gone down by $550 if you're looking at the top pay of what a teacher can expect. And furthermore, I have teachers who are looking at this pay schedule and saying, once you hit 15 years, what's the reason to stay? Because you're now looking at a decade without another raise. They're capping your salary at $50,000 at your 15-year mark, and then at 25 years, you can expect another $2,000 at that. So I'm entering my 20th year, but I have lots of teachers who are contacting me and saying, you know, I'm entering my 16th year. Apparently, I've just entered a dead-end job. And so it's important that we focus on these veteran teachers and not cap salaries at 15 years and tell them that they're not more valuable at 20 years than they were at 15.
Maybe the only profession that's doing that.
That's true.
Mr. Chair, now's not the time, and this doesn't address the issue that Bobby's raising, but under your leadership, this board adopted a resolution a few years back that to seek being number one in the South. Southeast, that's correct. And so I just point out that is a number we keep chasing because it keeps going. So I'm not sure exactly what that is. I think Virginia or Georgia 1 probably has that. And but it is probably in the range of $59,000 or $60,000 average. And again, that wouldn't address Bobby's issue, but it would address the bigger picture.
And I had a question for Mr. Superintendent. I know you submitted a budget separate from our budget.
Request, yes.
A request, budget request, separate from our budget request from the state board. And, you know, one of the things you had on there was that early childhood piece to the tune of, I think, about $1 million of recurring funds. And are you going to present to us what happened with your budget request separate from this, or how will we, did you get that $1 million somehow?
No, I did not. We made a push for it. I think it was a great interactive tool to get into the homes of 4-year-olds who might not have access to pre-K.
Sort of like Mr. Alcorn's work.
And in order to have them reach kindergarten readiness, because we know one huge part of being ready for school is letter recognition, number recognition. Yep. And there are programs out there that show that they are helpful with that. That was not funded in this budget, so we will continue working with the B3 Council, which should come out with action plans and work in the long session to hopefully.
So you didn't get any of that particular request funded?
No, I did not.
How about your other requests? Did you want to give us a summary of anything?
Yeah, like
you
personalized
requested?
learning was a good one. That was, but
personalized learning, we've made calls in on trying to see how we can further use our allotment for digital learning to keep promoting that. Really, the heaviest thing was the school safety, making sure that we get attention on school safety and drive that home. And then while
you got that.
not everyone, yes, and not everyone is happy with where teacher salary is, and that will continue to be a discussion point. It was nice to see that there is going to be more than was already scheduled, and also the principal pay. The principal pay being more than what they had scheduled was important, because we've talked a lot about that around this table, how some issues popped up with the principal pay schedule that now are being addressed here.
Okay, so just in summary, with your budget, you would say school safety, I know you asked for a lot more than you
Yes.
probably
Oh,
asked,
yes. Very specific things that I asked for. Really, school safety was the top line that we were able to receive, and also some policy parts for military children, making sure it's easier for them when they're transferring from one state to another or one school district to another, that it's easier for them to land where they end up.
And I just, I appreciate that you've made an effort to stabilize this department, and I'm sorry you weren't successful working with your friends across the street to stabilize what this department needs to effectively support our 1.5 million students and 100,000 teachers.
No,
So
thank
maybe
you.
you'll have better luck next year.
All right. Thank you for your time. Again, I encourage you to look at the more detailed information on the FBS website and let us know if you have additional questions.
You don't really want us to do that, do you?
I know that you will. I'm just...
Well, thank you, Mr. Levinson, and for everybody participating. I now call on Dr. Petrie Martin to provide a brief update on the final changes incorporated into the strategic plan before we vote.
So thank you so much for giving us opportunity during last month's planning session to present to you our recommendations for the State Board of Education strategic plan metrics. We know that we have been in transition with Dr. Fabrizio's departure, so I have taken on this task, but I'm also very happy to say that Dr. Townsend Smith will be joining me as we continue forward to ensure that we complete the rest of our journey. And I thank you for that, Dr. Townsend Smith. So what we would like to ask is the approval of what we have provided to you today, especially in light of the fact that many of these metrics will be available to be included in this document in the fall. But then in the fall, when we include those metrics in this document, we look to add the following. We would like to add additional metrics on equity of educational opportunity. We would like to certainly add pre-K metrics, and we have had some discussions with Dr. Hsu regarding what that could look like. And then finally, we would like to add digital learning metrics as well that speak to personalized learning. So that is for the future of this plan, but for today, we would like to go ahead and approve this, knowing that we will have the metrics to populate this document in the fall.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the recommended changes?
So moved.
A motion by Mr. Davis. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. McDevitt. All those, well, any discussion? Hearing none. Yes.
So only a question, it's not
Sure.
discussion. Is there a timing on when we would review where we are against the targets in terms of
Yeah,
the frequency?
we normally do that at least once a year at our work sessions. I think we've usually done it at every work session.
That is correct, and I think we're anticipating the November work session, because by then we will have populated the metrics that come from this year's accountability measures, so we should be able to have that discussion with you in November.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Duncan, we view it as a working document. This was a strategic plan that was developed 5 years ago, and we want to continue to look at it, update it, so it's not put on the shelf.
Right.
It's a living document, and if you can see from our proposals to the board, they're all fit into particular goals and objectives
Yes.
of the strategic plan.
I did, and I noted that with a very good feeling, but I did not believe in strategic plans till my good friend Mo Green put one in and graded it regularly every 6 months, good and bad. Not afraid to report the things where we weren't doing well. In fact, those were
Yeah.
the most important reports in
Right.
a lot of respects, and so
Right.
I do value it, and the reporting part is, and how we react to that
Right.
came to be the most important thing, so.
Right. Well, thank you for your question, and any other discussion or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed, no. Motion stands approved. Thank you, Dr. Petrie Martin, and glad to have Dr. Townsend Smith involved in this. The board calendar for 2019 was sent to you to review prior to this meeting. As noted, some months do not follow our typical meeting schedule due to holidays. Currently, the board rules require a motion to suspend the rules when approving the meeting calendar containing meeting dates different from the board's approved policy. Do I have a motion, or do I hear a motion to suspend the rules for January 9 and 10, July 11, August 7 and 8 meetings, and to approve the 2019 State Board of Education meeting calendar?
In hopes that it doesn't apply to me, I make a motion.
And I'll second that complete motion.
Okay. Very appropriate. Motion by Mr. McDevitt, second by Ms. Willoughby. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, no. The motion stands approved. I remind everyone that the July meeting will be via conference call, one-day meeting, July 5th. That's just a day after, so maybe you'll have to call in from somewhere, day after the 4th of July. Additionally, the board will have a possible call even early next week to take action on a couple matters. Let's see. Board members, do you have any items of new business that you would like to bring up? Okay, hearing none, I will ask if anybody is willing to make a motion to adjourn. Ms.
So
Willoughby moves. Mr. Alcorn seconds. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed, no. The June 7th meeting stands adjourned.